It's never good when you're invested in something that takes a long time to pay off, only for it to end up being a massive disappointment. Can you remember how underwhelmed you were when you played Cyberpunk on release day or made love for the first time? Right, guys? Right? You built it up in your head as being this amazing thing, and it just ended up being a big, wet mess. As a hardened WWE fan, I am of course used to this feeling, as the company has a long track record of paying off what could have been entertaining storylines in unsatisfactory ways. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 worst WWE storyline payoffs. Join us. Number 10, Mae Young gives birth to a hand. Whenever we get ourselves too wrapped up in the Attitude Era was the best sentiment, it's wise to think back to some of the absolute dirge WWE served us up in those halcyon days. One of the worst offenders was the saga of Sexual Chocolate, which saw Mark Henry confess to sex addiction and partake in all sorts of numerous outlandish segments, all while probably wondering why he signed a 10-year contract. After the world's strongest man was cured of his ills thanks to friendly neighborhood pimp The Godfather, the storyline took an even stranger twist as Henry entered into an on-screen relationship with OAP Mae Young. They announced that they were, against all odds and medical science, expecting a child, though the unbreakable Mae continued to take a beating in the ring and, following a big splash from Viscera, went into labor the next week on Raw. Mae gave birth to a rubber hand covered in pink goo, complete with Howard Stern sound effects and Jerry Briscoe puking in the background. Apparently the writers were told to axe the angle ASAP by Vince, who thought the idea of the hand was the funniest thing ever because it's a hand! Now that's a thinker. Number 9, DDP as the Stalker. For weeks, Undertaker's then-wife had been stalked by some unseen presence who filmed her and aired the footage on WWE television. Naturally, this sent the American badass apoplectic, and he vowed to find the stalker and make them pay. It was an intriguing premise in theory, and an example of WWE attempting to do something more gritty and based in reality. In the end, the stalker was revealed to be none other than Diamond Dallas Page. The reveal was very well done, and the unmasking resulted in a huge reaction from the live audience. But of course, when you sat and thought about it for a minute, the whole thing seemed a little bit off. After all, this was a huge departure for the already established Page, and as he rightly pointed out in recent years, the idea of him pining over someone else's misses was a little bit daft when he had former head Nitro girl Kimberly waiting for him at home. Things went from bad to worse for DDP as he was routinely pummeled during his and Taker's ridiculously one-sided feud, which ended when Sarah herself beat the former WCW heavyweight champion in a singles match on Raw. Number 8, the House of Horrors. Bray Wyatt / The Fiend was a magnet for silly nonsense during his WWE career. Some of it was rotten, some of it merely okay, and some of it was actually quite good. His 2017 feud with Randy Orton certainly ran that gamut, as the initial storyline of the Viper joining the Wyatt family, only to turn on them in spectacular fashion, was well done. Then the two met in a WWE title match at WrestleMania, where maggots and other creepy crawlies were projected onto the ring canvas, and you thought, geez, that was bad, but at least things can't possibly get any dumber. And you know something? You'd be dead wrong, because the next month at Payback, the two had their big blow-off match inside the House of Horrors. Said house supposedly belonged to the Eater of Worlds, and Orton showed up there in a limo, without a shirt on, but wearing regular pants and shoes, obviously. They then had a crap brawl around the gaff that ended with Bray chucking a fridge onto Randy before turning everything red and nicking the limo. The match continued later in the arena after Orton managed to free himself from the haunted fridge, but he ended up losing a short, poor match after the Bollywood Boys and Jinder Mahal interfered, leading to Sister Abigail. Number 7, Kevin Nash's text message. Despite being a ridiculously easy story to tell, WWE decided to dump a cold bucket of ice water all over the red-hot summer 2011 feud between CM Punk and John Cena and somehow turned it into Triple H versus Kevin Nash. Big Sexy returned to WWE for the first time in 8 years, minus his Royal Rumble cameo earlier in the year after the main event of SummerSlam 2011, attacking the straight-edge superstar after his successful WWE title defense against Cena and allowing Alberto Alberto Del Rio to cash in his Money in the Bank contract and become new champ. The next night on Raw, Nash explained his actions in a promo by revealing that Triple H had told him via text to stick it to the winner, accusations that the game denied. The whole thing devolved into a confusing mess, and in the end it turned out that Big Kev had broken into his pal's office, stolen his phone and sent the text to himself, supposedly because he couldn't sit idly by while Punk talked trash about the cerebral assassin and his family. Right, sure. Okay, that all seems perfectly fine then, nothing hollow and untrue about that whatsoever. Number 6, Hornswoggle McMahon. A thrown-together storyline that took place in the summer of 2007, replacing the Who Killed Mr. McMahon one that was nixed in the aftermath of the Benoit tragedy, the quest to find out which WWE superstar was secretly Vince's kid made for some entertaining television that we hoped would have a gripping outcome. There were many possibilities, and according to most reports, Ken Kennedy was the original choice to get the nod. But then he went and blew it when he was implicated in the Signature Pharmacy scandal, and WWE went in a wildly different direction instead. After weeks and weeks of teases, rumor and speculation, the results were in, and Hornswoggle was introduced as the punchline. Sorry, I mean the son that Vince never knew he had. All this payoff really resulted in was widespread eye rolling, some seriously unfunny television, and a bunch of so-so matches between Finlay and JBL. Oh, and a quick bonus entry too. 5 years later, WWE went back to the well of lazy ideas when they revealed that Hornswoggle had been the anonymous Raw GM, over a year after the trope had been discontinued. Number 5, Cena beats the Nexus. To recap, the Nexus were the gang of rookies who had been contestants on the first season of NXT The Game Show, led by competition winner Wade Barrett and featuring the likes of Daniel Bryan, Justin Gabriel, and Heath Slater in their ranks. They had made an impact on WWE TV by attacking anyone and everyone in brutal fashion, from legends like Ricky Steamboat to current stars like Chris Jericho and Edge, and even Vince McMahon himself. They got themselves over in a big way during the summer of 2010 and found themselves booked against a team of WWE stars in the 7-man tag team elimination match in the main event of that year's SummerSlam. Having such momentum and being presented as such a genuine threat, you would think that the boys in black and yellow would go over on the night, as Edge and Jericho suggested happen, but Super Cena had other ideas, and ended up shaking off a DDT on the concrete floor to dispatch Gabriel and then Barrett with relative ease. He later admitted that he got it wrong, but the damage was irreparable, and it was all downhill for the Nexus from there, right until Cena beat Wade in the main event of TLC and literally buried him under a pile of chairs. Number 4, doing it for The Rock. Though WWE were guilty of a rather shameful bit of bait and switch when they advertised Steve Austin for a triple threat WWE title match at Survivor Series 1999, despite knowing full well that he was injured and couldn't perform, they did at least set up a tantalizing storyline for his inevitable return when they shot an angle where he was run down by a mystery assailant in the arena parking lot. When the Texas Rattlesnake came back full time in the fall of 2000, much of WWE's televised output was dedicated to finding out who ran over Stone Cold. It was Commissioner Mick Foley who got to the big bottom of things and found out that Rikishi was the wheelman that night. Yes, the lovable dancing babyface who had become one of the most over acts on the show was the one who tried to murder the biggest star in the business. As Rikishi explained himself, he didn't run Austin over for his own gain, but rather to allow The Rock to emerge as a megastar in Stone Cold's absence, while basically accusing WWE of holding back non-white performers. The segment where it was revealed not only fell flat, but the whole episode turned a very hot babyface act into a lukewarm heel for no real reason, before Triple H was revealed as the mastermind anyway. Number 3, Sting loses the game. The last holdout from WCW, the potential of the icon wrestling in a WWE ring had been discussed to death, and some had given up hope as it looked as though the Stinger was happy to ply his trade in TNA. But now he was under Vince McMahon's employ, and not only that, he was going to be wrestling the boss's son-in-law at WrestleMania 31. One would assume the heroic babyface would go over on the dastardly authority figure on the grandest stage. I mean, since it was his first WWE match and all, and the storyline practically demanded it. But why give the fans what they want when you can rehash the Monday Night Wars mid-match and remind everyone that you were the war winner almost 15 pissing years ago? WWE's insistence on beating WCW's former stars is well documented, and Triple H himself was guilty of doing the dirty on the likes of Scott Steiner, Booker T, and Goldberg during his early 2000s reign of terror. But why do it on Sting, who had so much audience support and really needed to prevail more than Triple H on the night? The justification was that Triple H needed to be built up for an eventual rematch with The Rock, which never ended up happening. Number 2, the limp end of the invasion. By rights, the invasion should have been a record-setting storyline that featured an untold number of WCW versus WWE dream matches. We all wanted to see Austin battle Hogan, The Rock take on Sting, and Ric Flair grapple with Kurt Angle, but because all the biggest stars had guaranteed contracts with AOL Time Warner and got paid to sit at home and do nothing, we got Hugh Morris instead. The WCW and ECW invasion of WWE started well, but got diluted quickly as it soon looked suspiciously like WWE versus WWE, with a couple of new guys like Booker T and RVD sprinkled in. The invasion did have its moments and wasn't all bad by any means, but the culmination of what should have been one of the greatest tales in wrestling history boiled down to WWE's two biggest stars battling it out. I'm not one to dog on The Rock versus Steve Austin because that combination is better than Cocoa Pops on a Sunday morning, but there was something very climactic about the supposed inter-promotional rivalry of the ages ending in a match that featured not only them, but also Shane McMahon and Kurt Angle on the side of them. Number 1, the higher power. The Undertaker and the Ministry of Darkness's feud with Vince McMahon and the corporation was soap opera sports entertainment silliness turned up to 11. Flaming teddy bears, kidnappings, and ritual sacrifices, it seemed as though nothing was off limits as the tale unfolded every week on Raw with another twist, turn, or cliffhanger, leaving Attitude Era fans desperate for more. A lot of the content that came out of the feud was hokey, yes, but Undertaker's claim of a higher power pulling the strings behind the scenes was genuinely interesting. Was there a brand new character destined for the main event? Someone from McMahon's past coming back to haunt him? A new signing from WCW? The possibilities were endless and wildly speculated on. Christopher Daniels and the Jackal were often discussed as those who could be it, but alas, turned out it was Vince Austin! It was Vince all along! Yes, the higher power was none other than Mr. McMahon himself. The whole thing had been an elaborate and illogical ruse designed to get back at Steve Austin. The de-hooding makes for a hell of a meme, sure, but as a payoff it was weak and didn't make a lick of sense as the whole storyline was riddled with inconsistencies. Swerve, bro.